As extreme heat continues to pound our region, the high temperatures paired with the influx of data centers have many concerned about the toll these conditions could take on our electrical grids. Now, WTOP reporter Scott Gelman looked into this today. He joins us now live to talk about the potential impacts. Scott, thanks for taking time with us. First, what have you heard from our local power companies? How do they say they're dealing with the heat and added strain of data centers that draw so much power?
Well, Jim, we know, first of all, it's no surprise to anybody how hot it is across the D.C. region. You all have been talking about it. We've been talking about it. And significantly, PJM, which is the regional grid operator, actually hit a record on July 2nd for peak usage. Now, it's preliminary, but essentially they are saying that it's likely an all-time record. And so all of this possibly could lead to what we looked into, this concept of a brownout. And what we learned from experts is it's so minor that folks might not even notice it at home. It's a little bit less power in your toaster, a light that's just a little bit less bright. It might flicker brown, hence the name brownout. And what's really interesting about this is despite the data center demand that you described and all of our smart accessories at home in our kitchens, our phones, our tablets, still there are people that are opting into energy-saving, cost-saving programs that are essentially preventing really dramatic outcomes when we have the real excessive heat like we have this week and like we had over the July 4th holiday. These are programs where folks essentially say, I volunteer for the utility company to alter the amount of power that I'm getting during the time that the grid is being strained. And experts that we've spoken to say those programs are really making a major strides in preventing, all of us from losing power when it's super hot or super cold outside.
Boy, that's encouraging to hear. Scott, let's talk more about that week leading up to the 4th of July. It was so hot, as you know. I have to imagine we put a lot of strain on the grid that week. What did you hear from utility companies about how they managed that?
It was a struggle, and as some of your viewers may recall, the Department of Energy, Federal Department of Energy, actually gave some of these utility companies the option to go ahead and put their data centers on generators because of how much strain that excessive heat along the July 4th holiday was creating. But we learned that while some of them came really, really close to needing to do that, feeling like the strain was so extreme it was necessary, they didn't ultimately have to, and that's an encouraging sign. But still, the strain remains. And again, on July 5th, PJM, that regional grid operator, saying an all-time record. I believe it was between the 5 and 6 o'clock hour on July 5th. It was so hot that day after 4th of July that there was an all-time peak load, which is just really significant given how many hot days we've had in the last couple of years, too.
And Scott, if we continue to see these long stretches of extreme heat, does that put our area at higher risk of experiencing, you mentioned brownouts, even blackouts too?
It does. And one thing that a lot of the utility companies that we spoke to for our reporting on this shared with us is that a lot of the outages that have occurred previously, including during that July 4th holiday, were storm related, right? An animal on a line, a tree branch on a line. So they've stressed that there have not been any so-called brownouts or blackouts due to extreme heat. But as you all have been reporting, it's getting hotter and hotter, and the possibility becomes increasingly likely. And it's one of the reasons, Jim, that you see transmission lines and all of these projects that a lot of us have been reporting on, because they say in order to avoid getting to that worst case scenario that you need that extra help. And so they're monitoring it closely, but of course it's still heating up. So it's something we're just going to have to continue watching.
Scott, thanks so much for sharing your insights. We appreciate it. WTOP's Scott Gelman joining us live tonight.